I am proud to be a member and spokesman for the Every Voter Counts Alliance, but the views that I present today are entirely my own. I speak for nobody but myself, as my Conservative Party colleagues told me many, many times. I want to begin with may seem like an odd reminiscence, but I'm going to bring it right back to the matter at hand. When I was 18 years old, I wrote to a member of Parliament whom I'd seen on TV because something he said upset me and angered me and moved me to write. Now, the topic that he was speaking about, and I was writing about, was something called, Robin would remember this, Bill C-169, which coincidentally was in that day an electoral reform bill, and the specific issue that was being discussed in the news was restrictions on third-party communication. And that's not what I want to talk about. The specific trigger for my letter, and what I did want to mention, was the explanation that this MP gave on CBC's The Journal, as he was speaking. Politics was like a hockey game, he said, and the candidates and the parties were the players. Everyone else was a spectator. You can't play hockey, he reasoned, when the spectators leave the stands and come onto the ice. So according to him, if Canadians wanted to get in the game, they should form parties and get nominated and be candidates. Otherwise, shut up. Now, I'm not here to talk about third-party advertising. That's not really germane. But, you know, thinking about it, and we've talked about that particular electoral reform issue for decades, there were a lot better arguments that member of Parliament could have used. He could have cited the need for a level playing field. He could have talked about transparency and accountability. He could have talked about avoiding or preventing circumvention of the rules. Instead, his argument was, you know, elections are for us politicians, they're not for you, so go away. And at the time, I thought, and I still think now, that this view of politics, this, you know, that Canadians have to remain stuck in the electoral bleachers, that's a concept of democracy, an approach to democracy that might charitably be described as seriously messed up. And you know, it offended my 18-year-old sensibilities. So I made the obvious points. For example, there's no comparison between hockey fans and players to voters and parties. You can play hockey without fans. You can't have a democracy without the voters. And I think I also made, I know I checked the letter earlier this week, I also made the point that for a long time we had voters but no parties. So he replied within 2 weeks, in exactly 2 weeks, which is amazing by modern standards. And he started by blaming the news media, saying, and I quote, "I was not impressed by the TV program I was on." He then went on to make a reasoned case for the legislation, but he neither defended nor retracted his hockey players versus hockey spectators characterization. Now, I'm not going to name that member of Parliament because, in spite of that ridiculous and very offensive analogy, in his post-parliamentary career, he went on to do great things for ordinary Canadians as a champion of parliamentary accountability, of government accountability and government transparency. But in the intervening years, and particularly whenever electoral reform comes up, I have thought a lot about that arrogant sports metaphor. Because to me, it speaks to the overriding issue in the electoral reform debate. Are elections about politicians and parties, or about people? Are we to judge systems by the impact on parties, or on how well the results represent the views of Canadians? Now, as my partisan background is Conservative, I'm frequently asked why I support the principle of proportional representation given the impact on a Conservative Party. And my answer, bluntly, is that impacts on parties are not relevant. What counts is how closely the results reflect the views of people. So let me just step back and retreat to first principles. We all know that proportional representation is not a system, it is a goal, it's a principle, it's a vision. The principle that Parliament and our legislatures should as closely as possible reflect the preferences of people in direct proportion to their numbers. PR is not a system because, as we know, many different systems are capable of delivering or achieving that outcome. No one system achieves PR. Many different systems can realize that vision. Now, I'm telling you what you already know, but in my view, the debate suffers from a lack of focus on that ultimate goal or vision. The punditry, sometimes disparages PR as complex and unwieldy, but the goal, the outcome we want, well, nothing could be simpler. Nothing could be easier to understand and defend. An assembly that represents the views of Canadians in direct proportion to their numbers. We might legitimize a discussion of party winners and party losers when the unassailable moral high ground we hold is the people, and a result that fairly reflects their will. Now, as I said, I don't speak for the Conservative Party, and the one place the party and I agree is that I don't speak for the party. But in my respectful opinion, the party as an institution is focused clearly on what electoral reform means for it as an institution, and is concerned by what it looks out and sees. And I think the party's concern is exacerbated by a fear, how valid that fear is remains to be seen, that another large party, which I won't name, might be pushing winner-take-all preferential voting in single-member constituencies for its own self-serving reasons. But in the last 3 months, since the launch of the Every Voter Counts Alliance, many Conservatives, all long-time party members who've held positions within the party, and none of them, however, current parliamentarians, have contacted me to say that they have either become or have been for a time supporters of the principle, the goal, the outcome of proportional representation. And universally, their motivation is the same, because it's only right. You can't defend any system other than one in which the results reflect the views of Canadians in proportion to their numbers. Now, many of them, actually, in discussion, I find, came to that result by the same thought process I did. I'm going to share with you my thought process, how I got there. I came to accept, through time, that my political views, while shared by a large number of Canadians, are held by only a minority of Canadians. And I think I see a reporter here. No. But before Rob said, it's a great concession. Conservative says, Conservatives are more minority. The fact is, I would suggest that's the case of everybody. Canada is home to different large groupings of political views, but not any of those groups is a majority. Now, under the present system, the larger of those minority groupings get to jockey for exaggerated influence, right, for false majorities. What's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to treat all minorities fairly. And in this beautiful country, we're blessed with a diversity of views, and I don't mean just two views, I mean many views. Some views larger or more popular than others, but none of those views approaching anywhere close to 50% of the public. So because of this wonderful diversity of views, every Canadian belongs to a political minority. And the fairest way to treat minorities is to give them representation in the Assembly in direct proportion to their numbers. So as a political minority, which I know I am, but I think we all are, whether or not people recognize that, I found the answer obvious. I would rather be fairly represented in direct proportion to numbers all of the time than to benefit from false majorities some of the time. So when I talk to Conservatives, that's my message. In fact, that's my message to everybody. Now, as I said, the overriding issue is whether elections are about parties and candidates or about people, about the voters. Winning that battle over framing is, in my view, an essential condition to success. But I want to say a few words about winner-take-all preferential voting in single-member constituencies, which some disingenuously insist on referring to as preferential, the alternate voting, the minister's motion, the viable alternate voting system of preferential ballots. As you know, preferential ballots or ranked ballots are not a system any more than marking an X on a piece of paper with a lead pencil is a system, or machine balloting is a system. How a ballot is marked is merely an input. How those ballots are counted, across what size and type of constituency or region, and how outcomes are determined are what make a system. Ranked ballots can be an input into a single transferable vote system that delivers proportional outcomes across large regions. Or they can be an input into a system that delivers very skewed, very unbalanced, very unrepresentative outcomes. So we've got to correct, I know we're trying, we've got to continue to correct the language of this aspect in the debate. I cringe whenever I hear otherwise educated commentators, and just this week I heard somebody on CBC News World, I read a top reporter in the Toronto Star, talk about ranked balloting as a system, which it's not, as an alternative proportional representation, which it's not. Ranked ballots are an input, proportional representation is an outcome. But those who are intellectually dishonest, aided and abetted by those who are intellectually lazy, and those who are just plain lazy, use ranked balloting as a shorthand for winner-take-all ranked balloting in our current single-member constituencies. The faulty logic of that proposal and its disastrous consequences have been well ventilated by everybody in this room. I'm not going to rehash the arguments. I will note, though, that at the same time, many of us, and in fact, some members of this room and some members of the Every Voter Counts Alliance in other areas, municipal elections, for example, have agreed there are contexts in which winner-take-all ranked balloting makes sense. Party leadership contests, mayoral elections, local council elections in places where we don't have political parties. In short, winner-take-all ranked balloting is appropriate when there's only one office to fill and therefore only one winner. Not in elections to fill a collective assembly. Not when there are 100 offices or 338 offices to be filled. Now when I say that, this is where the purists will jump in and say, but don't you understand the Westminster system? Don't you understand that a general election is in reality 338 local elections to fill a single office of constituency MP? No, we all know that that is a technical form of our elections, but that's not their real function. Their real functions is allowing Canadians to choose among parties to populate a national assembly. An assembly that rightfully should reflect the views of Canadians in proportion to their numbers. So when we hear objections to PR based on the Westminster system, we must realize those, recognize them as, and expose them as scoundrels' arguments. Particularly given how Canadian political parties have bastardized the Westminster system. The theory. The Commons holds the executive accountable. Parliament controls taxation and spending. Committees exercise real oversight and scrutiny. And MPs are truly lawmakers. The reality. The executive dominates the Commons. Taxes are collected before legislation is passed. Spending is rubber stamped after it's already been committed. Committees take orders from political aides. Parliamentary debate is largely meaningless. And MPs pretend private members' bills, like National Fiddling Day, and you know I'm not joking, make the backbench relevant. And all of these failings can be laid at the doorstep of false majorities created by first past the post. Winner-take-all ranked balloting in current single-member constituencies will exacerbate the problems. Proportional representation will start to reverse them. So there are many, including many conservatives, who are attracted to the ideals of the Westminster system, particularly the emphasis on accountability and the relevance of Parliament. These traditionalists are not with us, but they could be and they should be, because the irony is that first past the post has compromised Westminster ideals like accountability and parliamentary relevance, and proportional representation alone can revive them. Now, one fear of traditionalists, including conservative traditionalists, is a fear of party dominance, or more generally a fear of party lists. And the answer to that is that PR, as a principle, as an outcome, can be achieved or approached through many different routes. Lists can be closed, lists can be open, you don't need lists at all. In fact, there is, as you know, a form of MMP where top-up seats are allocated not based on lists, but to the closest runners-up who've been running as constituency-based candidates. And that's the closing thought I want to make. We all know that the principle of PR can be achieved in so many ways. You know, it can be achieved in systems that look wildly different than what we have now. Or it can be achieved in a system or systems that engage voters as simply as the present model and engage voters in nearly the same way as the present system. Of course, with the important difference that the outcomes are proportional and representative. The cause of PR, the case of PR is unassailable, and it is right. As long as we don't let the other side control the language and hijack the narrative and take the focus off people, as long as we keep the focus on the actual human persons for whom our democracy was created, this is a battle we can, we will, we must win. Thank you very much.